Okay, but let's make sure it works first.
Yeah.
Okay. And Lindsay, you're on mute right now, so that'll be perfect, because hold on, so, Ashley, I have a question. Right now, Lindsay is on mute, and she's the one in the translation channel.
Mhm.
So will she need to unmute herself to be in? How does that work?
That I don't know. She should be able to do all of the language interpretation stuff at the bottom. If she goes to the interpretation little button at the bottom.
We're gonna give that a try.
So it says speaking to Spanish selected.
It's hard to do something in person and virtual and offer translation too, and in Spanish. We're multitasking in a major way.
In a major way.
And this is our first time doing this. How many people do we have joining us so far? How many Carissas are there? Those would all be the Homewood people.
We have 12 people here with us.
Will she know if someone has joined the translation room?
Ashley, do you think that our translator will know when someone has joined the translation room?
So, I'm not familiar with translation, but I know from my end, it gives me the option to listen to the audio in English and Spanish. So they can select that if needed.
Okay, all right.
And Lindsay's listed as the interpreter from English to Spanish.
Milana, I would say if after, the first 10 minutes of this, if nobody's joined in there, if you don't see anyone in the actually, no, let's go ahead and do the translation, Milana, because they're gonna record it. So we may end up having the Spanish version recording anyway, even if no one's in there. Do you mind doing that? I just want to go ahead and do the translation, but this is going to record the translation. Spanish version. Anyone's in there. It's a good thing to have. Yeah. I just thought. We're ready to get them.
Okay, say something real quick. So
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Good on translation too.
I've been with your daughter a lot lately. There's a.
Yeah.
You can do it by ideas, or you can do it by.
Just start speaking.
Yeah.
Just say, okay.
And my big thing of coffee that I brought in.
Y'all just tell me when y'all are ready.
Is Milana ready? She's ready. Okay, good. I can find your introduction. Okay, I think we are ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for your patience as we get set up here. This is our first one in the series. And we're also trying to do a Spanish translation. So we're learning new technology today. So I'm going to hand it over to Carissa. Thank you, Carissa, so much for organizing this and getting us started. And we're so excited about the topic today.
Not only are we excited about the topic today, we're also excited that this is being brought to you by several drug prevention coalitions and positive youth development coalitions around the state. So we're all tuning in. We have, of course, us, which is Safe and Healthy Homewood. I'm Carissa Anthony. I coordinate that project. Of course, there's the Addiction Prevention Coalition that Carrie represents, Drug Education Council, Drug Free Andalusia, Alabaster For Tomorrow, and Impact Montevallo. So this is literally covering the whole state. And so each of us in this series have taken kind of a topic where we know that we have an expert that we know will really give parents information that they need to help them in terms of helping their children make good choices, and kind of deal with some of those hard things, that happen during the teenage years, which is very common. So let me introduce Katy Bridges. She is a licensed professional counselor. She is the owner of Advantage Counseling. She has 6 children of her own, so she is quite the expert on this topic. And the topic is how to have hard conversations with your children. And so she'll talk about developmental stages, the psychology of the teen years and what that's like. And then just to start to put in your mind some of the hard topics that are going to come up and hard conversations you may have to have with teens and stuff. So thank you, Katy, and I'm going to let her take over.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. And thank you guys for having me. This is my second time and it was a great experience. So I'm glad to be back. Like Chris has said, my name is Katy Bridges. I'm an LPC in the state of Alabama, which is a licensed professional counselor. I provide mental health counseling in my private practice to children, adolescents, and young adults. So I think my youngest client is 4. So we do a lot of work on behavioral modification with parents and daycare. And then I have up to 21 years old, and we're working on life transitions and just that change into adulthood. So I have experience kind of working with the whole gamut of little people. And like Chris has said, I have 6 of my own, so I can kind of speak to these topics as a mother as well, or a parent as well. So I have kind of the professional perspective and the personal side. And I know a lot of times being an actual parent changes things a little bit, because sometimes the advice that you hear doesn't apply. And, it's just different sometimes when someone professional tells you something versus what is actually happening in your home. So I can relate to that. So today we're going to talk about how to have hard conversations with your teen. And I'm going to cover a lot of topics, but I know things are constantly changing and evolving. So if there's something that's on your mind or on your heart that I do not cover, please let me know. And I would love to hear from you guys when I get through. If there's something that you feel like I missed or you have questions about, y'all just let me know. I'm happy to talk or see what kind of input I can have. So briefly, what we're going to cover, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I know I need to slow down for translation. Briefly, what we are going to cover today is just the challenge of parenting and what that looks like with our individual children. They're all very different. I would like to cover the developmental stages of childhood, which helps give us a better idea of what to expect, what's normal, what's not normal, which is really helpful when we're kind of disciplining or dealing with behaviors that are concerning. I do have a list of hot topics, and this was kind of formulated, and it really hasn't changed tremendously. The same controversial topics or the same problems have stayed pretty tried and true. There may be new ones that we can add, and that's where you guys may come into play. Would be amiss to not cover red flags and warning signs, because obviously we're all here because we want our children to be healthy and safe. So when we are having difficult conversations, that applies to keeping our children safe and how to know if there's something else going on that we need to investigate a little bit more. And then some actual practical strategies for communicating with our teens and, well, any of our children really at any stage. So that's kind of the overview for today. Starting off, parenting is hard. I did not want to roll right into a conversation about how to have a conversation with your teen without addressing the idea that parenting is really hard. Right now, we have, as a mother, as a woman, as a parent, I know there may be some fathers out there, anyone that's parenting a child, we tend to compare, and we have all of this input coming from different directions, and it's really hard to know what's what. And because something applies to one family, it doesn't necessarily mean that it applies to your family. And I recognize the strain and the stress of, am I doing it right? And there's not one right way. And so to just consider that as you parent, and remember that just because like maybe you missed the mark one time or somebody did it differently does not mean that you aren't doing it well. And to kind of show yourself grace there as a parent, and everybody kind of falls short in some of these areas. So why is parenting hard though? Our children learn very differently, and anybody that has worked with multiple children or has multiple children can attest to this, that one child may be able to read directions and complete work. One child may prefer to see it on a video. One child may be dancing in the corner. Every child is very different, and so we can't expect that every parenting strategy is going to apply across the board. They express themselves differently. I've got a crier, I've got a rager, I've got one that just completely shuts down and doesn't speak when he's feeling stressed. So all of our children are going to express themselves differently. They're going to respond in different ways. And this piece applies more to their reaction toward us as parents, and how we treat them. So for example, if you raise your voice, your child might shut down, your child might ignore you, your child might raise their voice back to you. So just considering all of the differences in our children as we parent them, and that's going to change the strategies and the way that you respond and the way that you react. You know your child better than anyone. And this is the message that I really, really preach to all of my parents and my clients, is that yes, I may have something to say, or I may recommend something, or I may suggest something, but you know your child best, and you have an intuition. And if you feel something in your gut is wrong or off, trust it, and don't let somebody talk you out of that. You guys are the biggest advocate for your children. So it's not me, it's not the school, it's not their friends, it's you guys as parents. So don't question yourself if you feel like something is off. Go with that gut and follow your intuition, and just really lean into that and advocate for your kids. Don't get discouraged. Parenting is not you pick one path and you go down it. It's more like a process of elimination, which can make you want to bang your head into a wall, quite honestly. So you kind of have to try something, and if that works, great. If it doesn't, you keep moving and you try something else. And something that worked last week might not work this week. And that's completely normal. And just remember that, don't get discouraged. There is an end in sight, and you guys are going to keep moving, and just keep going. That's what I want to emphasize. Get to know your child, and this is going to take us into our next slide. But you cannot parent effectively if you don't have a relationship with your child. So I can't see what it says over there with that little window, but I think that this is in that little bubble over there. I should have it memorized, but I don't. There we go. If we're mindful of our children's strengths and weaknesses, we can highlight strengths and provide opportunities for them to succeed. So get to know your child. You probably do already know more about your child than you realize. For example, if you have a teenager who comes home and you can tell that they've had a long day and they immediately go to their room and slam the door, you've got a child who withdraws in times of stress. If your teenager comes home and just spills everything out for their day, you know that you have a communicator, which is excellent. So you probably already know more about your child's coping abilities and strategies, or just tendencies, than you realize. So the key is really to be watching. So as you become more aware about your children's habits and how they handle stress and strain and what's going on in their world, that's going to be a tool for you to use to respond to them in a way that's appropriate. Because as I mentioned before, all of our children are different and they're going to receive and respond in different ways. So kind of paying attention. And fairly, a lot of times I have parents who have children who are experiencing struggles and problems, and they'll say, you know, I just don't know what to do. And I'll ask them a simple question, you know, what does the nighttime routine look like for your child? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I don't even see them, you know. And so I think that needs to be something that everybody's aware of. And that doesn't mean to be all on top of your child every second. Give them that space, give them that independence, but being mindful and present and aware and kind of knowing what's going on in your child's life. Even that doesn't mean having to talk to them about it all day, just watching and seeing and observing. If you are lucky enough to have a child that talks to you, and we, all of them don't do that, listen and hear. One of the biggest, I think, parenting, like tragic flaws that I see is often, and I'm 100% guilty of this, when our children share something that's a problem with us, we want to immediately fix it. And as they get older, now when they were little, this worked really well. We'd be like, here, put a Band-Aid on it. Or, you know what, you just tell that kid this when you get to school the next day. When they're teenagers, that doesn't work anymore. And often they don't really care what you have to say anyway. They just needed to share it and kind of spill it to you. And maybe they just need some validation of how they're feeling and saying, like, that sucks. I'm sorry, you know, that you're feeling that way, or I hate that you had to walk through that. And, you know, I'm really sorry and I love you. And so listening, and maybe rather than trying to solve a problem, is also a great way to have your children communicate with you more. It kind of opens that door that they know that they're not going to have to deal with your feedback, because what they want is to really just get it out. And that's a really great coping skill. So, and a positive thing. And it allows you as a parent to have the opportunity to hear kind of what's going on in their lives. And then listening in those little moments too, where they may not even be talking about their problems, but hearing the words that they say and the tone that they're using and how they speak and their mood and their demeanor, just paying attention. And that can clue you in a lot. And sometimes you think, well, I do, I'm with my kids all day long, of course I pay attention. But if you really pull back and think about it, how much attention are you really paying to them and how they're acting? So moving into developmental stages of adolescence. The reason I feel like this is appropriate is because sometimes we forget when they're this tall, and they act like they're grown, that they're not. And so it's easy to expect them to behave like adults or behave in a way that we would behave when they're not necessarily capable of doing that. So as we move through adolescence, I started here because we're talking about teens. Of course, if you ever wanted any more information about younger ages or older into young adulthood, I've got that available. Early adolescence, this is really kind of the end of elementary school, moving into middle school. This is a really huge physical transition period. This is where a lot of times we're like, I think puberty is on the next slide, but I feel like it might be more relevant to this one. Bodies are growing and changing very rapidly. This is when there's a lot of internalizing happening. So people are paying attention to, okay, that body's changing, what's happening with my body? So instead of paying attention to everything else going on around them, they're paying a lot more attention to what people look like, what people are doing, and we're shifting from playing like interaction with people to, oh my gosh, how am I different than everybody else? And it becomes more about me, and it's hard to see a bigger picture. So gender identity and sexuality, these are going to be on my list of topics that we can get to later. So this is when that starts to really become abreast, like in a day-to-day life where they start to question those things. Black and white thinking. This is a good one to remember. So when you try to reason with a 10 to 13-year-old, some of them are able to do that. They truly are. But I would say fairly, if you have a problem, there's no middle. It's I either did bad or I did good, or I'm right or I'm wrong, or my friend likes me or they don't. There's not a lot of wiggle room for anything else in between. It's very concrete. So just a reminder of that when you're trying to rationalize or reason, that that's not necessarily something that they've developed an ability to do yet. Egocentrism, where this age children start to think a lot about themselves. For example, your child may go to school and they have like one tiny little hair out of place, and everyone at school can see it. Everybody can. It's glaring, it's huge, it's gigantic. No one's paying attention to that hair, but they think that everyone is. So that's really common in the preteen stage. Appearance, I think we already covered that, and just being concerned about what other people think of them. Privacy, this is where they're going to want to start being left alone in their room a little more, or they don't want you to know exactly what they're doing, maybe on their phones. We'll cover phones too. That's another topic. Boundary crossing, this might be the first when children start to really push back on a significant level. I think that's common up to this point, but so that's our early adolescence. Middle adolescence, 14 to 17. This is our high school years. A lot of parents think that once a child has hit puberty, that the hormones sort of start to balance out. That's not necessarily true. That hormonal fluctuation continues for quite some time, and it definitely is a contributing factor to mood and decisions. Right now is when we're shifting from peer relationships where friendships are of primary importance. And I guess I could go back. So you have, when you're a baby, you rely 100% on your parents to care for you. That is the only relationship you know. As you grow into childhood, you become more independent. And then that late childhood, early adolescence, you become really focused on your peers, and those friendships are the new primary social interaction. As you mature into this high school years, the need for a romantic relationship or partner becomes really prevalent, and that continues to progress, obviously, until adulthood. And that's when often people find partners and move on. So that's not unusual to happen at this time. I have on here, this is another hot topic, self-stimulation, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but this is really something that needs to be addressed and probably have a conversation. And that could probably be brought back to the 10 to 13 years too. And we can cover that if anybody has any specific questions, but that sexual desire and need is definitely going to be very present at this age. The fight for independence is just going to continue to happen. This is really, really normal. And so as parents, anticipating that and knowing that your teen at this level is going to be ready to be on their own, they think that they can do it themselves. They probably could if you threw them out into the world and they really had to fend for themselves. They probably could do okay. We don't want to do that. They still do need you for a lot of things, but they think that they're able to do it on their own. And so kind of being mindful of that and finding that balance between pulling back and letting them have that independence versus trying to control every little aspect of their lives is an important balance to try to establish. And that's different for every child, for sure. Same, the brain development still here is not to adulthood. I think 25 now is where they're saying that's when our brain finishes fully maturing. So we've still got a lot of growth left to do here and a lot of changes. A lot of those changes are related to impulse control, decision making, and that kind of fight or flight. I know y'all have heard about that, but that's another slideshow. But they're not fully developed to be able to sit down and make the same decisions that we would as an adult. And so trying to have those conversations like y'all are on the same level is just not necessarily realistic. emotions are going to drive the majority of their decisions right now because of that brain development. They're not able to separate. Here's how I'm feeling, but this isn't, I need to wait a minute, that 24-hour period of waiting. So emotions are driving what's happening. Late adolescence, this is more our college years. They're basically physically adults. We're kind of coming out of that volatile stage into adulthood. And this is where a lot of teens struggle with identity crisis and kind of, who do I want to be? Who am I now that I am independent? I don't have this, I don't have anything, and where do I go? So that gives them a tendency to feel very lost. And so I guess that plays on they have a stronger sense of individuality and want to identify on their own. So if they're not able to do that, that's a crisis of identity essentially, and that is incredibly stressful. Future-based decisions, college, job, family, friends, all of those things are becoming more stable and more clear in a plan for the future. We're going to continue to separate from family. Like I mentioned before, the priority is no longer going to be mom and dad. It's going to be friends and romantic relationships. And your opinion isn't going to matter nearly as much. They're probably going to look to those peers and people closer to their age for decision-making input. That covers that. Do you guys want me to pause for a minute? Does anybody have questions about what I've covered so far, or you want me to keep going? Wait till the end. Okay. So here's my list of tough topics. This is a list of things that I see on a weekly basis. Sex. That's a big one. And it's across the board, and there are so many things that affect this decision. Not that it's y'all's decision, but affect your input toward your children, such as spirituality, safety, age. There are a lot of things that go into this sex topic. Think of your questions, write them down now. Sexuality, this is a big topic right now too. Even as young as the elementary schools now, I'm seeing children starting to question that. And if your child isn't questioning their sexuality, there's probably someone at the school who is, and your child is exposed to that. And so having conversations with them about that and being able to talk to them and say, hey, why is this child different? And being able to address that in a respectful way and a healthy way is really important. Bullying is really, really tough. Some of our schools do a better job of managing this than others. Homewood seems to have a pretty good handle on that, but it inevitably is going to be a part of our children's lives, and how we handle that as parents can really change our children's hearts and minds a lot. Cell phone use, this is a huge one. Social media, sexting, internet, it can be devastating, but it can also be devastating to not have. So this is a double-edged sword, and this is a big one. So I want to hear kind of y'all's input on that when we move forward. Obviously, social difficulties, conflict in relationships. This is normal, but there are certainly circumstances where it becomes outside of the norm or more egregious than what would be expected. And trying to figure out, is your child part of it, or is your child being targeted? Is your child creating problems? And where does your child fit in on those kind of difficulties? And what role does he or she play in that? And how do you handle those when you don't have control over other people's children, frankly? Curfew. This one, I don't have a ton of topics about, but I can kind of give you the standard time frame if anybody has questions about that. Body odor, this is going to come into play for our early adolescent years. If you've got good middle school PE coaches, they'll have deodorant to hand out to all of the students, because about that time, by the time you get to middle school, if you're not considering deodorant and bras, consider it. And let's see, body modification, this would be piercings, tattoos, money. This applies on a number of levels. Money could be, what does your household income look like? What can you afford versus what can other families afford? And you have the comparison game going on, especially I would say here, fairly. That's probably a little bit more prevalent than in some other areas. And how much money do you allow your kids to have? Jobs, what does that look like? And what is it to be spent on, and how do you provide them with that kind of income? Lying, this is a big one. And it probably needs its own slideshow too, but lying is really difficult to manage. And this is something that I think every parent experiences. And how do you handle that? How do you respond to lying when that is present? Substance use. This is sadly more common than anybody would like to acknowledge. It's happening at a very young age, and it is definitely present in all of our schools, all of them, and at the homes of our families as well, which is relevant because a lot of our children are struggling as a result of substance use in the home. So having a conversation about that. Self-harm, suicide, that's going to roll us to our next slide. This is a big one. I do a lot of work with adolescents who are self-harming, and there is a little bit of a differentiation between self-harm and suicide, not always, but a lot of times, and a lot of parents aren't aware of that. So I would like to cover that in just a minute, just as a kind of a psychoeducation principle. Mental health struggles, depression and anxiety. I think our entire society is riddled with these right now, including our children. And we just walked through our COVID era, and I think that didn't do any of us any favors, adults and children, just kind of not knowing what to expect. And obviously our world is in turmoil. That applies to our children as well. And all of these things are contributing kind of in this. It's basically like the bottom of the pyramid, and sadly. And I will comment on depression and anxiety. A very wise person kind of cleared this up for me. Depression is often linked to something that has happened in your past. It's usually behind you. It's something that you maybe guilt or shame related, or loss or grief. Often depression is past related, as opposed to anxiety, which is often anticipation of what's to come in the future. So that's an easy way to sort of break those two things down. And how are they different and how are they the same? Well, a lot of the feelings are the same, but they're kind of on the ones in the past, one's kind of future oriented. Eating disorders. This is very child specific, but relevant, especially for our athletes and a lot of our young women. So those are my main list of tough topics. If I didn't cover anything, please write it down and let me know. I can add it. Red flags and warning signs. This kind of goes back to the self-harm, suicide. When we're talking about our children's mental health, watch, listen, know your child's norm and what that looks like. And when you notice something different, that's when you need to go with your gut, kind of like we were talking about earlier. So when children start to become depressed or start to, and these, I think, I can't remember exactly where I pulled these from. I'll have to find a reference, but these are pretty standard red flags and warning signs for suicidal ideation and childhood suicide. So if you see a change in sleep patterns, that may just be depression, but that's a precursor or kind of foundational stepping stone for suicide. So if your child is normally an early riser and suddenly starts sleeping 20 hours a day, that's a red flag. Or if your child can't sleep anymore and is up all night trying to do things when that, and just any dramatic change in sleep pattern. Academic performance, if you see that drop and it's not related to a specific event. So that doesn't mean if you travel and you go on vacation for 2 weeks and you come back and your child's grades drop, that might not necessarily be a red flag. But if everything is normal as usual and you see a significant decline in performance, athletic performance, I would throw that in there as well. That's a red flag. Excessive moodiness or crying. This is very subjective, especially in the middle school years. Some children are just moody and they cry a lot, and some don't. So this is where it comes to knowing your child. But if you see a change, that's the most important thing. Have you seen a change? Eating habits, noticeable weight loss, weight gain. Same thing. If you notice a change, excessive binge eating or anything out of the norm. If your child is actually saying, I just don't think I can do this anymore, expressions of hopelessness or worthlessness. And it may not be, I want to die, I don't want to be alive anymore. It might just be, life is so hard. I don't know that this is going to get any better. Just little things like that that sort of clue you into a sense of hopelessness, or that, nobody likes me, I don't have any friends. Those are things that I hear a lot, that worthlessness or lack of value. This is probably one of the ones that I would, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were touchscreen. I'm sorry. That's one of the ones that I would encourage you guys to pay really close attention to. Let's see, paranoia and excessive secrecy. You can count on the fact that if your child suddenly starts trying to be sneaky, they're hiding something. Just go on and anticipate that. Or if they're saying, I didn't do anything, what's the biggest thing you do when you know you're in trouble? You are defensive about it. So paying attention to that. Self-harm, self-mutilation, and that can look like a number of things. So we can cover that if anybody has specific questions. Body image concerns, and that's, again, if you notice a significant change, significant amount of time in the mirror, seeing them alter their body. Isolation is never good. Spending hours alone in your bedroom at night, not good for anybody, grown-ups, teenagers, anybody. Abandonment of friends and social groups. And this can look like two things: them abandoning your child, or your child saying, I'm done with that, I don't want to do it anymore. There's usually a deeper rooted something going on there. Personality shifts and changes, aggressiveness, anger. I would say isolation is another one of those personality shifts. If you have a child that is traditionally extroverted and very interactive, and that shifts, that would be alarming to me. Let's see, practical strategies for effective communication with your child. This is kind of something you can actually take home with you. And as I mentioned before, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It really, really applies to the individual child, and you're not going to get it right every time. So don't set yourself up to fail. Don't set your children up to fail thinking that, you found a solution for all of your problems. It's a trial and error process, and it's okay for you to acknowledge that and let your children know, like, I don't know exactly what to do, and I'm not sure that I'm going to get it right, and I make mistakes, and kind of sharing that with them and letting them see that you're human too goes a really long way with developing or enhancing that relationship with your teenager. Because a lot of times we present ourselves as, flawless, and we seem to know everything, or at least that's how they perceive us. So when they can kind of get a sense that you don't necessarily feel that superior to them, and I don't mean that you're not, because you're obviously a parent and they are a child, but when they have a tendency to soften when they recognize that that you aren't God, you aren't you don't know everything, and that you make mistakes and you're human and you fail too. So it goes a long way. When we're talking about those hot topics, those controversial topics, you getting comfortable first, and I cannot say this enough. So I embarrass my children sometimes because I'm so comfortable talking about things that they're like, please stop. So if you want your child to talk to you about an uncomfortable topic, then you can't be uncomfortable, because that's just going to make them uncomfortable. So you can fake it, you can get more comfortable with it, you can just practice your straight face, your unfazed face in the mirror. But, if you've got a child that's coming to talk to you about masturbation or sex or birth control or drug use in the locker room at school, and you're like, oh, what? And it rattles you, I can probably guess that they're not going to come back and have another conversation with you about that. So if you know that something's coming, prepare yourself before you prepare them, and just kind of be comfortable having that conversation. And that, as silly as this sounds, even having that conversation with your spouse or your partner or a friend before you have it with your child, to just like utter the words out of your mouth that you never thought that you'd have to say out loud, it really helps. It truly does. So getting comfortable yourself first. Don't go in guns blazing to have an uncomfortable conversation with your child if you're not comfortable talking about it. It probably won't end well, or it probably won't happen again. Finger pointing. This is a really important strategy for our adolescents, because they do not like to hear that they are doing anything wrong or that they've made a mistake. I'm a little guilty of that as well as a grown woman. So when you are having a conversation with your teen that is difficult, and you approach it as, you went where, or you did so and so, and it's an accusatory statement, they're probably going to immediately bristle up and become defensive and shut down. So I should have, I normally would have like a specific conversation, and maybe you guys could share something with me. But saying like, I know this was really hard for you, or I can't imagine what it was like to be there when this happened, or I don't understand what's going on, please fill me in, versus I can't believe you did that, or something. Does that make sense? That rather than having an accusatory tone, pulling it back to how you're feeling, and this is how what is happening right now, this makes me scared for you, or this makes me worried for you, tell me more about that, rather than sort of condemning. And listen. And I had this on another slide. So if you want to know what's going on, stop talking, be quiet, and let them say something. And I'm really guilty of that, because once something happens and I've got something to say about it, I'm not going to stop talking till I get it off my chest and I've said what I need to say. And they checked out, 10 minutes ago, possibly like you guys are checking out right now. Listen, just let them talk. And silence, as awkward as it is, I promise you, if you can outlast them on silence, they'll break on you. You sit in the car in silence and they don't have their AirPods and they don't have music, somebody's going to say something. Just wait it out. So silence is a really, really great tool for getting your teenagers to talk to you, if you can eliminate other stimulus. We spoke of this a little bit earlier. You don't have to fix the problem. Now, if we're talking about things that are unsafe for your child, drug use, pregnancy, unsafe sex, other risky behaviors, you need to fix that. There is a role for you as a parent to step in and make sure that your child is safe, 100%. But a lot of the problems that are happening in your teenagers' lives are nothing that you can do anything about. And so when you try to come up with a solution to everything that they throw at you, it's exhausting. And it's sort of, I don't know if you guys as adults have ever been in a conversation like that, where you just needed to tell them what happened, and they're trying to tell you, well, did you do this? Did you do that? Well, why don't you do this? Did you try this? Why didn't you tell her? I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to send an email. And they're like, no, like, I just needed to say it. I just needed to tell somebody and for them to hear it. And often that's really powerful. So you may not be able to fix it, and give them the opportunity to do it on their own and build some independence. And as they're able to problem solve independently, that grows confidence, and it gives them even more power as they move forward as a young adult. Anticipate change. If it works today, it may not work tomorrow. And that's really frustrating, but and if it works with one child, it may not work with another. And there are going to be changes in relationships. There are going to be changes in households, families change, friends change, bodies change. There's just so much change, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so being able to frame change as something that is an opportunity for growth versus something that cripples you or immobilizes you is a really great weapon. Not a weapon, a tool. I guess it could be a weapon, but start conversations early. This goes kind of back to the getting comfortable first. You don't want to wait until, for example, you don't want to wait until your sixth grader starts her period and is blindsided by it before you have a conversation. Like, have that conversation before you know that's coming, and prepare, and you're doing everybody a favor. That's just an example that I see a lot, that it's not addressed and then it happens and it's a surprise and it's just really traumatic. If you talk about it a year ahead of time, then, and everybody knows what's coming, then it just softens that blow tremendously. And that applies to so many situations, not just that. Keep conversations positive. So nobody wants to have a hard conversation with somebody if it's like making you feel bad about yourself. I mean, that's our human nature. So if your conversation, if you think about, a scale, if it's all, here's what you did wrong, and here's what you need to do better, and here's how bad I think you are, and do better, you did wrong, versus here's what I am proud of you for doing. Like, maybe that was a crappy situation, but you came and talked to me about it. And I think that I'm really proud of you for that, and really trying to keep that pendulum balanced and keeping that positive. So even if it's a crappy situation, there's always something that you can find to point out and say, I'm thankful that you did this. Gratitude's always a good thing to fall back on in a situation where you can't seem to find a positive. What are we thankful for in this situation? And just kind of keeping that tone a little more positive and not just fussing at them. Limits and boundaries. This is a huge one. Consistency. It doesn't matter to me what the rules are in your family or your home. As a therapist, like, you set that tone in your family. But if today it's one thing and tomorrow it's another thing, and then next Thursday, grandma and grandpa are in town and the rules don't apply anymore, then it's going to be really hard to hold your child accountable to something if the line is that they're not supposed to cross is constantly moving. And that's not fair to them either. So just really having some clear limits, clear expectations, making sure you communicate those to your child and sticking by them. And if you can't hold yourself accountable to what you're asking of your child, then it's going to be really hard for them to take you seriously when you're trying to hold them accountable to it. Model behavior you desire. This kind of plays into the previous one, emotionally and physically. If you're asking something of your child and then they watch you behave in a way that you're asking them not to behave, they're not going to take you seriously. So this applies in so many ways, shapes, and form. It could be mood, it could be yelling at people, it could be drinking, it could be, the list goes on and on. But if you want your child to behave a certain way, then you need to also hold yourself accountable to that standard and not ask them to do something that you wouldn't be willing to commit to as well. Honor independence and individuality. This is really hard for parents because you raise these wee little things and you've poured your life and your soul into them to keep them safe and to try to grow them into decent human beings safely. And then they want to go do it on their own. And that's really hard. It's really hard to let go of, but you got to give them the opportunities to develop that independence, because if you don't, they might live with you forever. And I don't think any of us want that either. But no, finding opportunities for success and independence is great, and individuality, and honoring that to some extent. There are obviously limitations to everything, but giving them that freedom and giving them a little bit of trust if they've earned it. Some of them don't deserve it. Some of them do. So give it to them if they do. They were probably, oh my gosh, I've got more. I'm just gonna keep talking. Be honest and open. Honesty is the best policy. Don't lie to your kids and then expect them to tell you the truth. Even lies of omission. By the time they're teenagers, they're on to you. So if you want to be able to trust them, they need to be able to trust you back, and tell them how you're feeling. Don't beat around the bush, talk to them, just put it all out there. You will not regret it after it's done. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Don't, with independence and individuality, don't set your children up for failure. Lying is a great example here. So I used this example last time, I think. If I look over and I see Miss Carissa and I'm like, did you steal my pink Stanley Cup? Like, I'm giving her the opportunity to say yes or no. Knee-jerk reaction is probably going to be like, no, I didn't steal from you. What? And so you set your child up to tell a lie, where I could just say, hey, that's not a pink Stanley Cup. Can I please have that back? And you cut out the opportunity for your child to tell a lie in the first place. So stuff like that, don't set them up for failure. Don't put them in a position where they have a choice to do the wrong thing if you can remedy that. There are a lot of different situations that applies to. Recognize their need to feel in control and utilize that. This is really powerful with important with teenagers, and a really powerful tool is giving options, but also still controlling those options. For example, like, do you want to go to the football game, or, you know, and stay out till 10 o'clock? Or do you want to have friends over and stay up until 2 a.m.? That's a random example, but instead of just letting them flounder and say, well, I want to stay out till 3 a.m. at a bonfire in the woods, and you have to say no, like, here's two options and I'm in control of both of them, but you still get to make the choice, and it kind of empowers them. And I mean, that applies to little kids as well. Like, instead of saying, what do you want for a snack? And it's like 18 Pop-Tarts. Well, no, then you have to say no, but you could be like, do you want to have a banana or do you want to have toast? And then they get to pick, and there's still a sense of control in that. Very simplistic example of that, but I think you guys get the point. Active consequences versus withdrawal. This is a huge one. The cell phone. When you take the cell phone away and there is no ability for your teenagers to connect with their peers, they're literally cut off from their lifeline. I'm not saying give every child a cell phone. That is not what I'm suggesting. They need to have an opportunity to connect socially with peers in some way, shape, or form. I think that that's really healthy, and it's different than we were when we were that age. It's just different. It just is. And so we can cover that if you guys want to talk about it later. But what I mean by active consequences versus withdrawal, instead of taking things away from your child, there's only so much you could take. If you have one of those kids, you know what I mean. Like, there's only so much you can take away before they're sitting in their room with like a blanket and a pillow, and that's all they've got. There are no privileges. They don't get to do anything. They don't get to go anywhere, and that's not fun for anybody. So active consequences, like taking out the trash, you know, dishwasher, and they should, some of them may be doing that anyway as chores, but just instead of taking something away, making them do something physical that is not pleasing to them is often an option that seems to work better, because nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to unload the dishwasher. All right, well, I think that is the end of this. And I mean, just a word of encouragement to everybody that it is hard. And if it wasn't hard, then come talk to me and tell me what you're doing. But it's very difficult to be a parent, and don't question yourself. Just keep moving. Don't compare yourself. Just listen to your kid. And you guys do you, and reach out for help when you need it. But really just listen, pay attention, and keep going. So that's it for me, I guess.
Any questions from the room? At what age, I do have a question, at what age do you think parents need to start talking about things like vaping and stuff like that? At what's a good age to really?
I would say before they get to middle school, so maybe 10, 11 years old. It is definitely present at middle school, and there are probably it's probably present and even earlier than that. No, I mean, I think about that 5th grade year is when a lot of those conversations that's just a baseline, I would say, when that's about time to have conversations about that. And at least, you know, tell them what it is, because the last thing we want is for our kids to learn about something unsavory I will use that word, from their peers. Because you don't know what you're going to get with that. So being able to tell them in an educated, safe fashion is always probably better than letting them learn it on their own.
And we have Ashley that is moderating the online version. So Ashley, if you see that anyone has any questions, if you want to just throw that out to us.
Yeah, so right now there's one question and it says, what are the ways that many or most teenagers like to be communicated with by organizations? For example, only short videos or other forms of content also.
What do you mean by, like, can you give me an example of an organization you're referring to?
So I think this question means like how would like a coalition communicate with teenagers?
Snapchat, Instagram, I would say social media and text. I think those are probably the primary. I'm trying to think of what there's a Be Real. I mean, there's so many different social media platforms I can't keep up, but that is where I would go as far as advertising or trying to connect. And I don't know, maybe I'm off on this, but for example, like the crisis text line is a resource for suicidal ideation that is available 24 hours a day. So they, like, if you wanted to reach adolescents with some sort of resource like that, a Snapchat platform would be a great opportunity because they're in there all the time. And that's where that's what's going to be in your face. You know, any of those social media platforms, or TikTok, probably the biggest one. Doesn't sound fun, but that's probably where they get the most information, sadly.
Katy, you brought up, you touched again on suicide when you were talking about the Crisis You Talk line, the Crisis Center You Talk line. And in your presentation, I remembered you talking about suicide and self-harm and that they're different, but they can coexist together.
Yes.
So we do kind of, I think it's pretty common, at least among my children, hearing them have concerns over friends that are self-harming. So what would you say to parents if that is something that their child is struggling with, or maybe even what might be some signs that a child's hiding that they're self-harming?
Sure.
What are some words of wisdom on that topic?
Yeah, well, self-harm can look like a number of things. So when we think of self-harm, I think probably the main thing we think of is cutting. And that's usually done on wrists, arms, anywhere. But you know, once somebody catches on, it becomes more deceptive. So like a lot of times, like upper inner thighs, abdomen, things that are covered by clothing that you can't see. So for example, for cutting, you know, if it's 105 degrees heat index outside and you've got a teenager sweating in a hoodie from head to toe, they may just love their hoodies. They may just love their hoodies, and they do love their hoodies. But that also might be a warning sign that, hey, I'm trying to cover something up. Again, that's all about kind of paying attention, looking, and what do you have access to. Diet is kind of a form of self-harm as well. We could move into eating disorders. The list goes on and on, but I guess to the beginning of your question, self-harm versus suicide, they often do coexist, but more often than not, self-harm is not related to suicidal ideation, which means I want to die. The majority of the time it's used as like an extreme coping mechanism for just pain release. So if someone is feeling like, for example, if I'm feeling a really heavy, powerful emotion, I might scream or yell or go for a run, or however you get that. I might sit on the floor and cry because it's just overwhelmed me and I don't know what to do with it. And so this is common and kind of trendy at that early adolescent stage. I hate to use the word trendy, but often it has been outgrown by the time they get to high school, but I don't know how to cope. And when I cut, I am able to disassociate from this pain in my brain and focus on this. And it's kind of like it takes my mind off, it distracts me, it moves me completely out of whatever was stressing me. And I feel this and I have this release and I can keep going. So it's not necessarily, I want to die. It's, I've got to get out of my head. And this is a tool for me to do that. Does that make sense?
But an unhealthy tool.
Absolutely an
So-
unhealthy tool.
Right.
Yes, an unhealthy tool. So there is a specific type of therapy that is made. It's called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is geared directly towards a lot of self-harm. It basically works on distress tolerance, which means if you have a distressing situation, I might walk away from it and be like, man, that was, whew, like, that was rough. Somebody else might be crippled by that because they have a very low distress tolerance. And so trying to improve that and increase those skills is a therapeutic tool that often goes with self-harm. And that is usually often something that responds very well to therapeutic treatment. Suicidal ideation, it could certainly progress to that, but often the two are not tied to one another, which is kind of a misconception, I would say. And so I do talk to parents who are experiencing children who have self-harmed and they are so scared naturally. And it's scary, even if it's not, suicidal ideation. It's still frightening to see your child hurt themselves. But often once they hear that, it sort of takes that like, okay, we're not like on the ledge. Obviously we need some help, but it's going to be okay kind of thing.
Those were my questions. If you have questions. There's more in the box up here. There isn't yet. She said there's not. I don't think, it says Ashley was checking and she says, Ashley, is there any more questions that have popped in here at the very end? I don't see any.
Yeah, actually, just one more just slid in. It says, how do you have hard conversations with a child who doesn't want to grow up, who appears to be oblivious to all the hard things and feels uncomfortable when you do bring up hard topics?
That is called resistance or avoidance. And that is not necessarily something you can change about your child. So without knowing a specific topic, but if your child is purposefully avoiding having a hard conversation, I would not let that stop you from having that conversation. And that doesn't necessarily mean go force them to sit down with you and talk, but, and it again, it's difficult for me to necessarily speak to this without a specific example, but I would not let your child's resistance or avoidance prevent you from still sharing what you feel needs to be shared or having that conversation. So you don't want it to turn into a session where you're like just talking at them. And that's what it's going to feel like. Or maybe put some time limits or some boundaries on that and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. Ask open-ended questions, which means like instead of saying, do you want to talk about this? They're going to say no. Maybe like, can you tell me why you're not wanting to have this conversation with me? What is making you so uncomfortable about this conversation? And it kind of throws the ball to them. So they have to respond with something other than a yes or a no. Might be an I don't know. That's a common one. But I would just continue to bring it up in a controlled situation and try to address in an unaccusatory or just a casual way where it doesn't feel like it's such a huge deal, I guess, because once you get down that snowball down that path and you know that there's the resistance and it's something that's been, you've been trying to talk and you didn't, and you've been trying to talk and you didn't, and you've been trying to talk and you didn't, then it becomes a thing, and it makes it more difficult. So just taking that pressure off and giving them an opportunity to speak, even if they don't want to. Silence, also another good tool here. And just kind of sharing too, like, I love you. Here's, my wisdom and here are my thoughts, but I trust you to make a decision. Or if you don't trust them, you know, what do you see? How do you see differently? What would you do? Giving them the opportunity to share.
Any questions?
You were talking about isolation earlier.
Mhm.
For air. Just not wanting to be around anybody.
Yeah. So teenagers are gonna want to be alone, probably. They don't want to hang out with us fairly. I get that. So that would be more of like observing a change in behavior. Now, if your child is coming home from school, grabbing some food, going up to their room, spending the entire evening alone, eating in their room, watching TV in their room, playing on their phone in their room all night long, only coming down to get food, not really communicating with the family, I would say that that's an unhealthy level of isolation. Then, you know, if the door's open, that's a little better, but if they're excluding themselves from everything else that's going on in the household, then I would say that that's problematic to some degree. Now, if it's maybe one night a week, they just need to go decompress and just be alone, great. But if that's a common theme, I would say that that is probably not a healthy pattern to fall into, because there's not a person in the world that doesn't need some sort of social engagement and interaction. Kind of leads to a depressive state, as evidenced by COVID. Does that answer your question?
Well, y'all, thank you. Yeah, Katy,
Thank you for
thank you.
having
We
me.
appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of our partners out there that have helped with this, helped promote this and everything, and appreciate all the people who tuned in online as well as the people that are in the room. So we all are kind of in this together. And so I think doing this statewide is just more evidence of the fact that we really are all in this together. So thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ashley. I guess you're going to